You think you're being seen. You're being scanned. The dangerous ones don't come at you loud. The man who reads you best never raises his voice. He watches. He waits. He lets you tell him exactly where you're soft. Every need you let slip, every flattery you lean into, every threat that makes your jaw tighten. That's data. That's a handle. And the moment he finds one, he doesn't have to beat you. He just has to pull. So before you learn to read anyone else, understand the only thing that actually protects you: becoming unreadable. Not cold, not closed. Unexploitable. A man who gives nothing to grip, because there's nothing inside him that needs you to grip it. This isn't about fear. It's about no longer handing strangers the rope. Let me be clear about what this is, because the line matters more than anything else I'll say. This is armor. It is not a weapon. There is a kind of man who studies people the way a thief studies locks, looking for the give, the weak point, the place where pressure turns into entry. We are not becoming that man. We are studying how that man works, so that when he turns his attention on you, his hands find nothing. The predator reads people in order to take. We learn to read the reading, to recognize the probe, to feel the pull before it lands, so that what we've built stays ours, because you are building something. A name, a discipline, a body of work, a circle of people who trust you, a reputation that took years and can be spent in an afternoon. The more real that thing becomes, the more it's worth taking, and the more men appear who'd rather take it than make their own. So understand the asymmetry you're living inside. To them, you are an opportunity. To you, they are a threat you didn't choose. Everything that follows is for one purpose, so you cannot be played. Not so you can play. Hold that line, because by the end, you'll see the levers clearly. And seeing them is exactly the moment a lesser man reaches for them. You won't. The strength is in the restraint. A man who can manipulate and refuses to is not weak. He is the only kind of strong that lasts. Stay with me, and by the end, the scan comes back empty. So why you? Why now? Because ambition has a shape, and that shape can be read from across a room. The man who wants nothing is almost impossible to move. There's no door in him, no hunger pointing somewhere, no reach for the manipulator to step into. But you are not that man. You want things. You are reaching, and every reach is visible. When you're building, you present surface. You need money, so you take meetings with people you haven't vetted. You need talent, so you let people close who flatter well. You need recognition, because the work is still young and the world hasn't confirmed you yet. And that need leaks out of you in 100 small ways you don't notice. The way you light up when someone names your potential. The way you lean in when someone says they can open a door. The hungrier the season, the more doors you're standing in front of. And a door is just an opening seen from the other side. This is the cruelty of it. The very drive that builds your life is the drive that exposes it. The man with nothing has nothing to defend. You have everything to defend, and you're moving fast, and speed makes you legible. So the stakes are not abstract. This is your work, your name. The people who depend on you and trust your judgment about who gets let in. When you get read and pulled, it's rarely you who pays the full price. It's the thing you were building, and the people standing inside it. That's why this is worth your seriousness, not paranoia, stewardship. You guard the gate because of what lives behind it. Now, understand how the read actually works, because it's far less mystical than it feels. The men who do this best are not mind readers. They are pattern readers. There's a cluster of traits psychologists named the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and a cold, conscienceless streak. And what binds them is a callous, exploitative core, the ability to look at a person not to understand him, but to locate his lever. And the lever they look for first is always the same. It's the gap. The gap between the man you want to be seen as and the man you're afraid you actually are. Between the self-image and the self-doubt. They map that gap fast because it tells them everything. Flattery feeds the image, threat squeezes the doubt, and most men are wide open at one end or the other. They find it by watching your reactions, because every reaction is information. They run cheap probes, a backhanded compliment to see if you flinch, a loaded question to see if you over-explain, a small provocation to see if you brag, defend, or go quiet. None of it costs them anything, and all of it tells them where you're wired. What lights you up reveals what you're starving for. What makes your jaw tighten reveals what you're afraid of. These are your tells, and you are leaking them constantly. Not because you're weak, but because you're human and unguarded, and you assumed you were among friends. The read comes before the move. Always. By the time a manipulator acts on you, he has already watched you longer than you watched him. He doesn't need to be smarter than you. He just needs you to keep reacting where he can see. Once he has read you, he reaches for the handles. And there are 3 bolted onto nearly every man, named decades ago by a therapist named Susan Forward, who called them fog: fear, obligation, and guilt. Pun was deliberate. Fog is what clouds your judgment, so you can't see the request clearly. You just feel the pressure and move to make the pressure stop. Watch how each one is gripped. Fear is the simplest. A threat of loss, of conflict, of punishment, of withdrawal. Reaches straight for whatever you're afraid to lose, and suddenly you're not deciding. You're flinching. The manipulator doesn't even need a real threat. The hint of one does the work, because your fear fills in the rest. Obligation is more elegant, because it wears the mask of fairness. He does something for you. A favor, a kindness, an opening. And now there's a debt, and the debt has weight. And when he calls it in, refusing feels like a violation of your own honor. He didn't give you a gift. He installed a lever and called it generosity. And guilt is the cruelest, because it turns your own conscience into the weapon. He tells a story. How hurt he is, how let down, how a good man wouldn't do this to him. And the story is built so that saying no makes you the villain in it. Now the cost of refusing isn't losing the argument. It's becoming, in your own eyes, a bad man. So you fold, not because the request was reasonable, but to relieve the discomfort of feeling like the one who failed. See the pattern under all 3. They don't attack your weakness. They attack your strengths. Your loyalty, your sense of duty, your refusal to be the bad guy, and turn them around to point at you. The better the man, the more handles he carries. Your conscience is the lever. That's why a good man needs to understand this most. The other great handle isn't pressure. It's praise. And it's harder to defend against, because it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like finally being seen. This is the flattery vector, and at its most extreme it has a name: love bombing. An intense early flood of admiration and attention that arrives faster and larger than anything you've earned yet. The new partner who calls you their soulmate in a week. The new associate who tells you, before you've shown him much, that you're the most impressive man he's met in years. A mentor figure who anoints you. It feels like recognition. It is reconnaissance, Because flattery is a probe like any other. It tests which compliment you reach for. Praise your discipline and watch your eyes. Praise your intelligence and watch. Praise your potential, your taste, your strength. And whichever one you lean into, whichever one you let land a little too easily, that's the hungry one. That's the need you didn't meet in yourself, now glowing like a target. And here's the mechanism that should sober you. The louder that hunger, the cheaper you are to buy. A man who deeply needs to be told he's brilliant can be bought for the price of a sentence. The flood does something else, too. It front-loads a debt. All that early admiration raises your investment before your judgment has had time to assess the person. So by the time the warmth turns conditional, you're already in, already attached, already working to keep something you never should have spent yourself on. Need you carry into a room is the door. The man who feels whole walking in is the man who can't be flattered through it. If you intend to become a man, nothing can be pulled out of. Stay with me. Because that's exactly what the forged mind is for. The man building something real who refuses to be moved off his line by people who learned charm instead of character. We go deep on this, slowly, without hype. If that's the man you're forging, subscribe and stay in the room. Because we've named how they read you and how they grip. And now comes the cruelest hook of all. Then the armor. The deepest hook is not a single pull. It's a rhythm. Decades ago, behavioral psychologists studying reward schedules found something strange. A reward given every single time produces weaker, more fragile behavior than a reward given unpredictably. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. No pattern you can solve. It's why a slot machine holds a man, and a vending machine never could. Apply that to a person, and you get the cruelest hook there is. The manipulator gives you warmth, approval, attention, and then withdraws it. Then gives it back when you've stopped expecting it. Then pulls it away again, for no reason you can name. And without deciding to, you begin to chase. You start performing for the next hit of approval, working harder in the cold spells, flooded with relief when the warmth returns. Clinicians describe this as the engine behind the bonds that make no sense from the outside. The ones where inconsistency makes the attachment stronger instead of weaker, because every cold stretch makes the next warm moment feel like rescue. Understand what's been done to you here. The manipulator has taken your own hope and turned it into the leash. You stay because you remember the warm version of him, and you've decided that version is the real one, and the cold is just a phase you can fix if you're good enough. You can't. The cold is not a malfunction. It's the schedule. The rationing is the method. And the moment you see that the warmth was always being measured out to keep you reaching, the hope lets go. And the leash, which was never tied to anything but your own wanting, falls. So now we turn from the threat to the armor. And the first piece is the one everything else rests on. Emotional self-regulation. Between their probe and your reaction, there is a gap. Small, often less than a second, but real. And in that gap lives your entire freedom. The Stoics built a whole philosophy on it. You don't control what happens to you, you control the response. And the space between the two is where a man either rules himself or gets ruled. The manipulator needs a fast read. He needs your face to move when he says the thing, your voice to tighten, your eyes to flick toward the compliment that landed. A regulated nervous system starves him of all of it. Slow your breath. Hold a neutral face. Let a beat pass before you answer, every time, until it's not a technique anymore, but the way you are. Understand precisely what this does. You are not suppressing what you feel. That's a different thing. and it costs you. You are simply refusing to broadcast it in real time to someone who is fishing. The feeling can be there. It just doesn't have to show, and it certainly doesn't have to drive. When you don't flinch, the fear probe fires into nothing and reports back empty. When you don't leap at the praise, the vanity probe finds no hunger to map. When you meet provocation with the same level calm you'd meet good news, the man running probes on you slowly realizes his instruments have gone dark. He can't steer what he can't read, and he can't read a man who has put a deliberate, unhurried pause between every stimulus and every response. This is the master skill, not because it makes you cold, but because it makes you sovereign. The still face is not a mask hiding panic. It's the outward sign of a man who is no longer available to be jerked around by his own reactions. Regulate first. Everything else is downstream of this. The second piece is about what you let people see. There's a practitioner's principle called gray rock. Becoming deliberately as interesting to a manipulator as a gray rock. Brief, flat, low drama. No supply. It works for a simple reason. The provocateur is fed by your reaction, and when you remove the reaction, you remove his payoff, and behavior that stops paying off slowly dies. But hear the precise edge of this, because it's the ethical heart of the whole skill. Gray rock is a containment tool for someone you have already identified as genuinely toxic. It is not how you treat the people who love you. The same flatness that protects you from a predator will quietly wound an honest partner, a real friend, a son. So the discernment of who you deploy it on is not a footnote. It's the entire point. You go gray with the manipulator, never with the people who earned your warmth. The broader principle underneath it, though, applies everywhere. Stop leaking your needs, your hungers, for approval, for status, for belonging, for certainty. Become a shopping list the moment you narrate them to people who haven't earned them. The man who tells a room what he's desperate for has handed every operator in it a map. So keep your wants close. Get your validation from your own standards and from the few people who've proven they want you whole, not useful. This is not coldness. It's not paranoia. It's the simple privacy of need, the understanding that what you long for is sacred, and sacred things are not laid on the table for strangers to price. A man whose needs are private is a man whose needs cannot be used. There's nothing fresh for the flattery to feed. Now we go to the center of it, the thing the rest is built around, and I want you to slow down here. Every handle a manipulator grips exists because there is a wound underneath it. The lever needs a fulcrum, and the fulcrum is always some unhealed place in you. Some fear you won't look at, some vanity you won't admit, some old guilt that still runs your decisions in the dark. And here's the law that governs all of it. A wound you have examined cannot be used as a handle. A wound you deny can be pressed forever, because you never see the hand reaching for it. Think about why that's true. The reason a probe works is that it surprises you. He says the thing about your status, your discipline, your worth, your right to be in the room, and it lands somewhere you weren't guarding, and the reaction fires before your reason wakes up. But if you've already gone into that place yourself in the quiet, on purpose, if you have already named the exact insult that would sting, the precise doubt that would knife you, the specific story that turns your guilt on like a switch, then when he reaches for it, you feel the hand coming. The probe arrives at a door you already locked, examined, and stood watch over. It still touches the wound. It just no longer moves you. So do the unglamorous work. Sit down with yourself and inventory it honestly. What, exactly, Are you afraid people will discover about you? Which compliment do you need too much? Whose disappointment still steers you years later? What would someone have to say to make your whole body go hot? Most men will not do this. It's uncomfortable, and it feels like weakness to even look. That's the trap. The unexamined man is the readable man. A house full of unlocked rooms he's never walked into, and the manipulator knows the floor plan better than he does. Knowing your own wounds doesn't make you fragile. It's the opposite. It converts every hidden lever into a known, defended door. You cannot be ambushed in a room you've already searched. The deepest armor a man can wear is not pretending he has no soft places. It's knowing exactly where they are, so well that no one can find one you haven't already found first. And this leads to the last mechanism, the still center the whole scan finally breaks against. Where do you keep your worth? Because that single question decides whether any of their tools work at all. The Stoics had a hard, clean idea here. They divided the world into what is yours and what is not. And almost everything men chase falls into the not. Other people's admiration is not yours. It's on loan, and the lender can recall it. Their approval, their applause, their opinion of you. Externals, everyone, outside your control, and therefore no foundation to build a self on. What is actually yours is narrow and unshakable. Your character, your effort, the standards you chose and held to when no one watched. The man who sources his worth from that, from inside, from what he did and who he was, not from how it was received, becomes something the manipulator has no tool for. Watch what happens to the levers. Flattery needs a hunger to inflate and finds none, because you already know the worth of your work and don't need a stranger to confirm it. Threat needs something it can take from you to deflate you, and finds that the thing your worth rests on cannot be taken, because it was never in anyone's hands but yours. The whole apparatus of the reed, the probes, the fog, the warm and cold, the love bombing, assumes a fulcrum out in the world that pressure can work against. The self-sourced man has moved the fulcrum inside, behind walls, no flattery climbs and no threat breaches. He cannot be bought up, because he isn't for sale at the price of praise. He cannot be torn down, because his standing was never propped on opinion. This is the inner citadel the Stoics spoke of. Not a wall against feeling, but a center of gravity that other people don't get a vote on. Build that, and the scan returns empty. Not because you hid the lever, because you stopped storing your worth where a lever could reach. Now the warning, because we're at the dangerous part. You can see the levers now. You understand fog. You understand the reed. You understand how warmth gets rationed to make a man chase. There's a temptation, quiet but real, that arrives exactly here. If you can see the handles on everyone else, why not pull them? It would work. That's the thing you have to sit with. It would actually work on most people, most of the time. Refuse it anyway. Refuse it completely. The man who learns to recognize the predator and then becomes one has not grown stronger. He's just changed which side of the cage he stands on, and he has betrayed the entire reason he started. Remember what this was for. You learned this to protect what you're building, your work, your name, your people, not to start taking other men's. The moment you turn these tools outward, you stop being the builder and become the thing you armored yourself against. Understand the deeper point about strength, because this is where most men get it wrong. The power was never in being able to manipulate. Plenty of hollow men can do that. The power is in being able to and choosing not to, in holding a capability and governing it. Restraint is not what's left when you're too weak to act. Restraint is the proof that you're strong enough too. A man who could pull every lever in the room and instead keeps his hands at his sides is not naive. He is the most formidable man in it, because he answers to something the manipulator gave up long ago. Hold that line. Armor, never a weapon. Discipline that defends you is the same discipline that keeps you worth defending. So return, finally, to the room from the beginning. The man is still there, still watching, still patient, still waiting for the tell, the flinch, the lean, the flicker of hunger that tells him where to push. He runs his probe. A little flattery to see what you reach for, a small threat to see what you flinch from, a story built to find your guilt. And this time, nothing moves. The face stays level. The breath stays even. The praise lands on a man who already knew the worth of his work, and the threat reaches for a center it cannot find. He waits for the handle to appear, the way it always has with other men. It doesn't appear. There's nothing to grip. Not because you've gone cold, but because there's no longer anything inside you that needs him. Understand what you have and haven't become. You are not armored against love. The man who can still be reached by honest affection, who lets the people who earned it all the way in. That man is fully alive, and you stay him. You are armored only against exploitation. That is the whole of it. Feel everything. You just no longer hand it to strangers as a map. The unreadable man is not the closed man or the cold man. He is the man who has met his own wounds, who governs his own reactions, who keeps his worth where no one else can spend it. The scan comes back empty, and it stays empty for the rest of your life. And because of that, he gets to do the only thing that ever mattered. He gets to build in peace, give nothing to grip, and build.